Hello and welcome to Gaggia Caffe TV. What we're going to be doing today is we're going to be looking at the test mode for our Anima machine. The test mode enables you to use each individual part of the machine on its own, so you can diagnose what might be wrong with it. You can also use parts of the test mode to help fix certain problems that have gone wrong with your machine. So we're going to cycle through each part and discuss what's going on. The very first thing that you need to do is you need to turn the machine on into the test mode. To do this, you want to make sure that the machine is completely off, and that means also turning it off at the back using this switch back here. You're then going to hold espresso and menu and turn the machine on from the back. When you've done this, you should see that the screen lights up and it should say something that you're not used to. Ours here says FW020004. The numbers will change depending on what batch number your machine came from, but this does mean that you've moved into the test mode. To cycle through each layer of the test mode, which exercises each different part of the machine, you're going to push the standby button. So we're going to push it for the first time, and that's going to test the keyboard. So the keyboard functions can be tested using this mode here. It says KEYB at the top for keyboard, and when you push each individual key, you should see the name of the key pop up on the screen, and also the screen should turn red to tell you that you've pushed that key. If you've got something wrong with your keyboard, this isn't really the kind of thing that you can fix at home, so do give us a call if one of your keys isn't working. The number to give us a ring in the UK is down there in the description, but this isn't a very common fault, so you should move through this part of the layer okay. So we're now going to push the standby button to move to the next part of the test. The next part of the test is using each individual sensor that the machine has. It's got 3 different sensors on board. It's got the water sensor, the door sensor, and the Brew Unit present sensor. The water sensor is pretty simple to test. It should say Y, H2O equals Y, if you've got water in the tank. And we're going to test that by taking the tank out and making sure that the sensor changes from Y to N, yes to no, to mean we now don't have water in the tank. When we've taken the water tank out, it should now say H2O equals N. If it doesn't do that, one of the most common reasons for the sensor still saying that the water is present is that you've got some water still in the container just here. If you give it a wipe down with a dry cloth and make sure that there's no water in the bottom of the water tank container, that should fix that problem. Like I say, if it doesn't, give us a ring, but that will fix it 99% of the time. We'll put that back and make sure that the sensor changes from N to Y for the water now being present, and we're going to test the door. By the door, it means this bit here, the drip tray. When you open it like this by pulling it forwards, it should change from door equals Y to door equals N. Test it once more to make sure that it changes. And the final thing that we're going to do is we're going to test the BUP. That means Brew Unit present. And to test this, what we do is take the Brew Unit out, follow all the instructions on the Brew Unit, take it out, put everything back, and it now should say that there's water, the door is closed, and the Brew Unit is no longer present. And you should be able to verify that because you're holding it. So BUP equals N. To test the next part of the machine, we do have to put the Brew Unit back. So we're going to put it back into the machine, like so. Give it a bit of a push. It helps if you push both sides of the Brew Unit. Test that it's in nice and firmly, close everything up and push the standby button to get to the next part. The next part of the test mode is to test the Brew Unit itself. And what we're going to do is we're going to test that the Brew Unit can move through its full cycle of operations. It's currently in its neutral position, so it's not in the work position and it's not in the home position. The work position is all the way extended to the front, ready to dispense coffee, and the home position is all the way extended to the back, ready to receive grounds of coffee. At the moment, it's not in either of those positions, and that's completely normal, so it should say work equals N and home equals N. By pushing espresso, what we can do is move the Brew Unit all the way forwards into the work position, and when it's finished moving, you should hear it moving inside the machine. When it's finished moving, it should say work equals Y. Then you can push aroma strength, and again you should hear it moving, and it'll move all the way back into its home position, and it should now say home equals Y. To actually test the next part of the machine, what we're going to do is we're going to move the Brew Unit all the way into the work position, so we're going to hold down espresso. If for whatever reason your Brew Unit can't move, there could be a couple of reasons for that. There might be an obstruction inside the machine. You should have seen an obstruction, that might be the problem, or it might be that your Brew Unit is not sufficiently lubricated. So what you can do is you can use the lubricant that comes with the machine and lubricate the points on the brew unit that it marks to lubricate, and that makes it a little bit easier to move. But now we've got the brew unit in the work position, what we're going to do is we're going to push standby to move to the next part of the test. The next part of the test mode is going to test two things. It's going to test the Electro Valve and it's going to test the pump. The Electro Valve is the valve that decides whether or not the water is going to go to the espresso nozzles down here to make coffee or out through the steam arm to make hot water. And the pump obviously speaks for itself. That's the device that pushes the water through the machine. In order to test these things, you're going to want to put a jug in the way of the water that's going to come out, because we're going to be pumping water out of the front of the machine and you don't want to get that all over your kitchen side. To change the Electro Valve, what you do is you push espresso and you should hear a click from inside the machine, and it should change from on to off or off to on. When it says on and you turn the pump on, you should see water come through the steam arm here. If you change the Electro Valve to off, the water should now come through the espresso nozzles. It's okay if it takes 10-15 seconds for the water to come through the espresso nozzles here. If the pump turns off, you can turn it on again by pushing steam. It's okay if the water takes 10 or 15 seconds to come through the espresso nozzles. The journey from the pump to the end of the espresso nozzles is a little bit longer, and the pipes are a little bit thinner, so it takes a little bit more time. The water should more or less instantaneously come out of the end of the steam arm here. If it doesn't, if it takes more than 10 seconds to come through the steam arm, then you've got some obstruction in your steam arm. If it takes a long time to come through the espresso nozzles, or doesn't come through them at all, then you've got a blockage inside your espresso nozzles. This can usually be solved by degreasing the machine. You can degrease the machine, as we'll show in a later video, by putting a degreasing tablet down the pre-ground chute here. You can also clean it manually by carefully, and I do mean carefully, taking pipe cleaners and putting them up the inside of the espresso nozzles here and gently coaxing out some of the coffee grease that's been left behind by the espresso. But please, please, really, you've got to do that gently. If that doesn't work, it might be a scale issue. One of the things that we find is that the Electro Valve itself gets quite warm, and because it gets quite warm, there's water evaporating off the top of the Electro Valve, which means that some scale does get left behind inside the Electro Valve. The way that you can solve that, and this is if all else has failed, if the degreasing hasn't worked, if the cleaning hasn't worked, maybe it's a scale issue. If there's no water coming out of the espresso nozzles at all, it might be a scale issue. If you put descaling solution into your water tank and dilute it in the way that's recommended by the manufacturer, and then go to this part of the test mode and start to run the pump. And as you're running the pump, you flick between off and on. Then after a while, the descaling solution might have run through the Electro Valve, and it will have got rid of the scale, or it will have dislodged some of the scale that's on the Electro Valve, and you might start to see water start to come through the espresso nozzles here. We can't guarantee that that might be the problem, but if you live in a hard water area, then it certainly might be the case that you've got scale in your Electro Valve. We're going to go to the next stage of the test mode now, which is going to test the heater and the grinder. And the heater and the grinder can be tested using these two buttons here. We're going to be using espresso to test the heater and steam to test the grinder. Both of these things you don't want running for very long inside the test mode, because you're overriding the normal safety features that the machine has to get these to operate. To get the heater to work, what you're going to do is you're going to hold down espresso and then let it go. It should see that it goes from on to off as you do this. When the espresso button is pushed down, the heater is turned on. When the espresso button is let go, the heater goes to off. Don't hold it down for very long, because as I say, you're overriding the normal safety thermostat that the machine has, so you can actually overheat the machine by doing that. So just test that it works and then leave it alone. The final component of the machine that we're going to test is the grinder. Now we've got the brew unit, as you remember, in the work position, so it's not actually ready to take the grinds from the grinder itself. It does that when it's in the home position, but we're going to test the grinder anyway. But you need to make sure that you don't run the grinder for very long, because if you run it for too long, then the coffee grounds are going to be deposited inside your machine, because the brew unit is not ready to receive them. So we're going to push steam to turn the grinder on, and then quickly push it to turn it off once we've made sure that it works. So we push it to turn it on, and then quickly push it to turn it off to make sure that it works. We've seen that the grinder works, everything is okay. If you've got an obstruction in your grinder and it doesn't work, that's not really the kind of thing that you can fix on your own, so again, give us a call. We've reached the end of the test mode and we've run through all of the different components that the machine has to offer, but we have one final job to do. We need to make sure that the brew unit is back in the home position, which is where the machine expects the brew unit to be when it's turned off. So we need to push the standby button until we get to the brew unit function and then move it back to home. So we're now in the brew unit function inside the test mode, and what we're going to do is we're going to hold aroma strength just to move the brew unit all the way back to the home position, which is where the machine expects the brew unit to be before we turn it off. We've now reached the end of the test mode and we're going to turn it off from the back here. To verify that everything's okay, you want to turn the machine on real quick, push the standby button here, and you should be greeted with what you normally see when you turn the machine on, a little thermometer, and it's going to heat itself up. That means that the machine is all good and ready to go. Thank you so much for watching. Please like and subscribe the video if it's been useful to you, and enjoy your coffee.